11:47 at night. A parking lot on Merritt Avenue. One broken light buzzing like it's deciding whether to die. A man walks through with $8 in his pocket and nowhere to be but home. Then he sees it. 6 feet of leather and tattoos face down on the concrete. Iron Rider's vest, skull logo. The kind of man that made this neighborhood cross the street, lock the door, look the other way for 20 years. The gas station attendant leans out. Leave him. A stranger grabs his arm tight. You've got a kid. Walk away. The man on the ground isn't moving, isn't breathing. $8. That's all he has. That's his son's breakfast tomorrow morning. He looks at the body, looks at his pocket. The attendant calls out one more time, voice dripping with something between warning and contempt. Not your problem, man. Never gonna be your problem. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out the $8, and walks straight into the gas station. The parking lot was empty. Not late-night quiet. Not the kind of empty where you still felt the ghost of people who'd been there an hour ago. Actually empty. The fluorescent light above the gas station entrance had been flickering for so long it had given up pretending to work right. It buzzed, went dark for 2 seconds, came back dim. Darnell noticed all of this before he noticed the man. He was cutting through on his way home. Merritt Avenue gas station sat at the corner of his route, and the route mattered because he was 2 miles from his apartment and it was 11 at night, and his lower back had crossed the line from ache into something he didn't have a word for anymore. Not pain exactly, just presence. The constant presence of a body that had been asked to do too much for too long. He had $8 in his pocket. $8.47. He'd counted it in the back room of the diner before he left, the way he counted it every night. $23 in tips from the evening shift, plus the $8.47 left from yesterday's day. $31.47 total. He'd already run the math before he put his jacket on. $23 toward rent, 47 cents for the bus tomorrow morning. That left $8 flat for Theo's breakfast. Maybe oatmeal and juice. Maybe just oatmeal if the juice ran above $2. He knew the prices. He always knew the prices. That was what his life had become. Every dollar had a name before he touched it. He turned into the lot, and then he heard it. A sound. Low. Grinding. Like something being dragged across the inside of a chest that didn't have room for it. He stopped. There was a man near the side of the building, half in shadow, half under the broken light. Big. The frame of someone who had spent decades being used hard. Gray beard, arms covered in ink from wrist to sleeve, a black leather vest with patches across the back. Even from 20 feet away, Darnell could read the skull. The wings, the words across the top, Iron Riders. He'd heard that name. Everyone in this part of town had heard it. The man was on one knee, left hand flat against the wall, right hand pressed to his chest. His face had gone a color that didn't belong on a living person. Gray like something dialed down from the inside. The gas station attendant stepped out from behind the glass door. Young guy. Maybe 25. He looked at the man, then at Darnell, then back at the man. Don't, the attendant said. Not to the man on the ground. To Darnell. Don't even think about it. Those guys carry, all of them. You touch him, his crew shows up, and that becomes your problem. Not mine. He went back inside. Just like that, door swinging shut behind him. Darnell stood there. The man made the sound again. Shorter this time. Thinner. Like he was running out of space to pull air into Sue. A hand landed on Darnell's shoulder. He turned. Harold Stokes, his neighbor from the 3rd floor. Barrel-chested, gray at the temples. The kind of face that had been serious long enough that it had just settled that way. Harold still in his work clothes. He'd probably driven back from his daughter's place on the east side. He did that on weekdays sometimes, helped with the grandkids, drove home late. Harold looked at the man on the ground, looked at Darnell, and shook his head. Once. Deliberate. Reeves. His voice was low. Practiced. The voice of a man who'd spent 30 years deciding how to say things before he said them. You've got a boy at home. 7 years old. He needs his father to walk through that door tonight. Darnell didn't answer. I did it 30 years on the force, Harold said. I know exactly what VES means. I know exactly who those people are. And I'm telling you, man to man, walk away. Right now. Tonight. Darnell looked at Harold. Then he looked at the man on the ground. The man had both hands on his chest now. He wasn't making any sound at all. That was worse than the sound. I hear you, Darnell said. And he walked into the gas station. He didn't have a plan. There's no plan in a moment like that. There's just your feet moving and your hands reaching and your brain trying to catch up with what your body already decided. He grabbed a bottle of aspirin from the rack near the register. Grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. Put them on the counter. The attendant looked at him. Didn't say a word. Rang it up. $6.50. Darnell put $8 on the counter. Took Cook the bag and the $1.50 in change. Didn't wait for a receipt. He walked back out. Harold was still standing where he'd been, arms crossed, not moving. Reeves. You can go home, Darnell said. I'm not asking you to help. He crossed to the man on the ground and crouched down. Up close, the man was even larger than distance had suggested. Maybe 6'2", the body of someone who had never been small. His eyes were open but not tracking, just aimed at the sky above the broken light. His lips had gone from gray to something closer to blue at the edges. Darnell pressed 2 fingers to the man's wrist. Pulse, weak, uneven. But there. Hey, not out loud. Clear. Look at the man's eyes moved, slowly, like the effort of it was enormous. I need you to chew these. Darnell shook 2 aspirin into his palm. Can you open your mouth? The jaw moved. Barely enough. Darnell placed the tablets on the man's tongue, opened the water, held the bottle to his lips. Small sip. Just a little. The man swallowed. Winced. Good. That's good. Now keep your eyes on me. What's your name? Silence. Then from somewhere low and far back, Brick. Okay, Brick, my name is Darnell. Help is on the way. You stay with me. He kept talking. He didn't know what else to do, so he talked, not about anything important. About the flickering light above them that had apparently decided flickering was its permanent state. About how his son had asked him that morning what clouds were made of, and Darnell had said water, and Theo had said that didn't make sense, and Darnell had said honestly, you might be right about that. Brick's eyes stayed open, his breathing evened out, not much, but enough to count. Then there were headlights in the lot. Then sirens, blue and red cutting through the dark from 2 blocks away. And then a motorcycle came in fast enough that Darnell felt the displaced air before he heard the engine cut. A younger man jumped off before it stopped rolling. Maybe early 30s. Same zest, different patches. Dropped to his knees across from Darnell and looked at him with an expression that was trying to process too many things at once. Who are you? He said. Darnell Reeves. I live 2 blocks over. The younger man looked at Brick. At the aspirin bottle on the ground, at Darnell's hand still on Brick's shoulder. Did you? Gave him aspirin, kept him talking. The paramedics moved in. 2 of them, efficient and fast in the way people got when efficiency was the only thing standing between someone and the worst outcome. They had oxygen on Brick within seconds, had him on the stretcher, and moving toward the ambulance in under 3 minutes. One of them looked at Darnell as they passed. Aspirin? 2 tablets, maybe 6 minutes ago. The paramedic nodded. A small nod. Professional. The kind that meant something without making a production of it. Good call. They loaded Brick. And then his arm came up. He reached through the open ambulance door, and his hand found Darnell's wrist. Not strong. He didn't have strong left, but he held on. His eyes found Darnell's face and stayed there. Name, Brick said through the oxygen mask. Darnell Reeves. Brick held on for another second. Then the hand dropped. The doors closed. The lights went on. The ambulance pulled out of the lot and took all the noise with it. What was left behind was the buzz of the fluorescent light and the Sitch Gosselin and Harold Stokes standing at the edge of the lot with his arms at his sides, and an expression Darnell couldn't quite read. The younger man stood up. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a card. White, plain. A small logo in the corner. A crown with a pair of wings spread beneath it. Gene Pruitt, he said. I work with Brick. He's going to want to talk to you. Darnell took the card. Is he going to make it? He said. Gene exhaled, long and unsteady. I don't know yet. He got on his motorcycle. Before he pulled out, he looked back once. Then he was gone. Darnell stood alone under the broken light. Harold walked over, stopped a few feet away, looked at the place on the ground where Brick had been lying, looked at the aspirin bottle, looked at Darnell. You don't even know who that man is, Harold said. No, he could be. I know what he could be. Harold was quiet. I'm going home, Darnell said. He put the card in his jacket pocket, put his hands in after it, and started walking. Harold didn't follow. The walk home was 23 minutes. Darnell counted them without deciding to. He needed something to count. The streets were quiet the way this part of town got quiet after 10. A few lit windows, a dog somewhere. The sound of a television bleeding through someone's wall. He passed the corner store and clocked the hours sign out of habit. 6 to midnight. He filed it away the same way he filed everything, automatically, in the part of his brain that was always making calculations he hadn't asked it to make. He thought about the parking lot the whole way. He thought about the attendant going back inside. About Harold's hand on his shoulder. About the sound that had stopped, and how the stopping was worse than the sound. About Brick's hand around his wrist, weak and dry, holding on. He turned onto his street. The building was dark except for the stairwell lights. He took the stairs to 3 and opened the door to 3C as quietly as the hinges allowed. Mrs. Paulson was asleep on the couch. Small woman, 60-something, reading glasses still on her face, a paperback open across her chest. She watched Theo on the nights Darnell's shift ran past 10, never asked for anything, which made him feel worse about it, not better. He touched her shoulder. She startled awake. I'm home, he said. Thank you, Mrs. Paulson. She patted his hand, gathered herself, shuffled out without a word, the way she always did, like she was determined to take up as little space in his life as possible. He locked the door, walked down the short hall to Theo's room. The boy was on his side, one arm hanging off the mattress, mouth slightly open, hair doing whatever it wanted. His inhaler was on the nightstand beside a library book about dinosaurs that he'd been reading for 3 weeks without finishing because he kept rereading his favorite parts. Darnell picked up the inhaler, shook it once. Light, almost empty. He set it back down the way you set something down when you didn't want to think about what happened after it was gone. He stood there for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen and sat at the table. The table had been there when they moved in. One side had a long scratch that looked like someone had dragged something heavy across it years ago. One leg was slightly shorter than the others. Darnell had fixed it with a folded piece of cardboard and kept meaning to do something more permanent, and hadn't. The kitchen light hummed, a low, uneven sound he'd stopped hearing months ago. Tonight it was all he could hear. He put the card on the table in front of him. Crown with wings, Iron Wings Legacy. He turned it over. Nothing on the back, just the phone number on the front. He pulled his notebook from his jacket pocket, the small one he'd kept for years, refilling it from the same drugstore display when one ran out. His wife had given him the first one when they got married. She'd said, "You think so much, you should put some of it somewhere." He'd never stopped. He opened to a blank page, wrote 3 things. Theo is breathing. I got home. The man is still alive. He closed it, sat there another minute. Then he went to bed. 5 in the morning came the same way it always did. Not gradually, just darkness, and then the alarm and the full accounting of a body that had spent the night not recovering. Darnell was up before it went off. He showered. Put on the gray shirt with the bleach stain near the collar that disappeared if you wore the shirt right. Made coffee with what was left in the can. Drank half of it standing at the counter and left the rest. Then Theo appeared in the doorway, red pajamas with rockets on them. Hair in 4 directions, eyes operating at maybe 40%. Dad, hey bud. What day is it? Wednesday. Theo took a moment with that. What's for breakfast? Darnell opened the cabinet. He already knew what was in it. Had known since last night. One packet of instant grits, probably 2 months old, the kind Theo ate under formal protest. A half-empty jar of peanut butter. 3 crackers left in the sleeve. He opened the fridge. Half a carton of orange juice. No eggs. $8 would have bought eggs, a box of cereal, the juice, and maybe a banana. A breakfast you could put in front of a 7-year-old and feel okay about. Instead, grits, Darnell said. Theo made a sound, with peanut butter on crackers. Dad, crackers are basically small toast. They're not. They're flat. Toast is flat. Same concept. Theo looked at him with the expression he used when he decided something wasn't worth arguing about but wanted it on record that he disagreed. Darnell made the grits, put peanut butter on the crackers, poured the orange juice into Theo's cup and made it look like more than it was. Set it on the table like he'd planned it. Theo sat down and ate. He was 7. He was hungry. He ate without saying anything else about it. Darnell stood at the counter and finished his coffee cold. He didn't make anything for himself. Then someone knocked on the door, not politely. The kind of knock that had already decided something. Darnell opened it. Harold Stokes stood in the hall, still in yesterday's work clothes, which meant he hadn't slept. His arms were at his sides, but his jaw was set. Darnell stepped out and pulled the door, almost shut behind him. Reeves. Harold kept his voice down, measured. I've been on this street 11 years. I know everybody in this building, and I'm telling you what I know. What you did last night. I helped someone. You helped someone who belongs to a criminal organization. I helped someone who was having a heart attack. Harold looked at him for a long moment. You used your last $8, he said. Darnell didn't ask how he knew. Harold had been standing right there in the lot. He'd watched Darnell walk into that gas station. He knew what aspirin and water cost. What if his crew comes here? Harold said. What if that street? In this building? You've got Theo eating breakfast right now, Reeves. You thought about that? I thought about it, Darnell said. And the man would have died. Harold exhaled through his nose. He looked at the floor, then back up. I'm not saying your heart was wrong, he said. I'm saying the world doesn't always reward the right heart. I know that. Do you? Harold. Darnell kept his voice even. I hear you. But I have to get Theo to school and get to the warehouse by 7. We can talk tonight. Harold looked at him, then he nodded. Once, short. He walked back down the hall. Darnell went inside. Theo was still at the table. He'd eaten everything. He was watching the spot where Darnell had been standing with the quiet attentiveness he applied to things he didn't fully understand. Who was that? Mr. Stokes, from upstairs. He's loud. He's worried. About what? About me, Darnell said. Theo looked at him. Are you okay, Dad? Yeah, bud. You didn't eat. I'm not hungry in the morning. Theo did not look convinced, but he was 7 and he trusted his father, and so he let it go. The walk to Theo's school took 11 minutes. Same route every morning. Theo on Darnell's left. The backpack always too big. The bottom of it brushing the backs of Theo's knees when he took long steps. Theo narrated things as he went. He'd done this since he could talk. Ms. Ethers used to say he was born with a need to account for the world as it happened, to keep a running record of it out loud. That dog is watching me, Theo said. A beagle tied to a parking meter outside the dry cleaner. Darnell looked at it. Dogs watch people, he said. That one is watching specifically me. His eyes are pointed this direction. He's pointed at the sidewalk. You're on the sidewalk. Dad, his eyes are tracking. Darnell looked at the dog again. Its eyes were in fact following Theo. You're right, he said. Theo accepted this without celebration. Filed it. Kept walking. Half a block later. Dad. Yeah. What are clouds made of? Darnell smiled without showing it. Theo had been sitting on that question since yesterday. Water, Darnell said. A very small drops of water that got high enough that they just stayed there. But they're not wet. They are, actually. You just can't feel it from down here. Theo looked up at the sky, gave this real consideration. That doesn't make sense, he said. I know, but it's true? Yeah. Theo kept looking up for another few steps. Then he lowered his eyes and said, Okay, the way he said it when he decided to accept something that didn't satisfy him, but would have to do for now. The school's gate, Darnell fixed Theo's collar, which had flipped up at some point during the walk. Theo endured this for approximately 3 seconds before beginning to move away. Go on, Darnell said. Theo went 3 steps, then turned. Dad, don't forget my inhaler tonight. Darnell felt that land somewhere specific behind his sternum. I won't forget, he said. Theo went in. Darnell stood at the gate after the door closed, just standing, hands in his pockets. He found the card from Jean without looking for it, ran his thumb along the edge. He put it back, walked to the warehouse. The morning shift was 8 hours of work his body did while his brain went somewhere else. Stack, move, check the manifest, stack again. His coworker Vera had Wednesday mornings off, so it was just him and a guy by name Trent. I didn't talk much, and a supervisor Powell who talked too much about the wrong things. At noon he ate what he'd packed, peanut butter on crackers, same as Theo's breakfast, same sleeve. He sat in the break room alone and ate without tasting any of it. At 2 in the afternoon, Powell called him into the small office by the loading dock. Darnell knew before he sat down. Powell was leaning back, arms crossed, the posture of a man who'd already finished deciding and was now waiting to say it out loud. There's been some talk, Powell said, about last night. There's a video someone posted. Gas station on Merritt. It's been going around. Darnell waited. You're in it. There's a man on the ground next to you. Motorcycles. I've had 3 people come to me this morning asking questions I don't have answers to. I helped someone who was having a heart attack, Darnell said. I understand that. That's what happened. I understand that. Powell said it again, slower. Like the second time might accomplish what the first one hadn't. But right now there's a video with your face in it, and a liability issue I can't. You're sending me home. Powell looked at him. Couldn't hold it for more than a second. For now, he said. Until this settles. How long? I don't know yet. Darnell nodded. He went to his locker, got his bag, walked out. He went to the diner. He didn't have a shift until 5, but Vera was there for the afternoon. She was wiping down the counter at the far end when he came in. She looked at his face and put the rag down. Sit, she said. He sat. She poured coffee without asking. Set it across the counter and leaned on her elbows the way she did when she was going to say something straight. I saw the video, she said. Powell sent me home. I know, he called. Darnell looked at the coffee. The diner too? He said. Vera didn't answer right away. Vera. He wants to give it a week, she said. See how things look. A week, no warehouse, no diner, $62 he didn't have for Theo's inhaler, $180 short on rent, $1.50 in his pocket. What's in the video? He said. What does it look like? Vera chose her words carefully. Not to soften it, just to be accurate. It's short. Someone filmed from across the street. You're crouching over him, you can see his vest, and then the motorcycle comes in and she paused. It looks like you were already there when Jean arrived, like you two came together. Darnell set down the cup. Someone added a caption, Vera said. I'm not going to tell you what it said. He didn't ask. He sat for a while. Vera refilled the coffee without making a point of it. She didn't fill the silence with anything, and he was grateful for that. Some people knew when to just stay in the room. After a while, he took the card from his pocket and set it on the counter. Vera looked at it, looked at him. You going to call? She said. He looked at the crown with wings. He pulled out his phone, typed the number. His thumb sat over the screen for a moment. He sent a text. 4 lines. This is Darnell Reeves. You gave me a card last night. I'm available to talk if the offer stands. Let me know. He put the phone on the counter. 30 seconds. It rang. Jean's voice was younger than it sounded in person. Or maybe just tired in a different way. Mr. Reeves, thank you for reaching out. Brick's been asking about you since 6 this morning. He wants to meet, but the doctors have him for at least 4 more days. Can you come to Murphy's on 5th next Thursday? Noon. He's going to be okay, Darnell said. They think so, they said, if you hadn't acted when you did. A pause. They said it made the difference. Thursday, Darnell said. Thursday, Jean said. They hung up. Vera was watching him. Thursday, Darnell said. She reached under the counter and came up with a plate. Scrambled eggs and toast, set it in front of him. I didn't order that, he said. I know, Vera, I can't let you. It's already cooked. She picked up the rag, walked to the other end of the counter. He ate. He hadn't known how hungry he was until the first bite. Then he understood it completely. When the plate was empty, he stayed a little longer. Sat with the quiet of the diner in the slow part of the afternoon. Outside, the light had gone the color it went before rain. Not raining yet. The sky had made up its mind but wasn't ready to commit. He didn't know what Thursday would bring. He didn't know who Brick Callahan really was, what Iron Wing's legacy, whether, as any of this would turn into anything or settle back into nothing. He just knew he was tired, and Theo's inhaler was almost empty, and Thursday was 8 days away. He could make it to Thursday. He put the card back in his pocket and left $1.50 on the counter, which was everything he had, and walked home. The 8 days moved the way. 8 days moved when you had nowhere to be and nothing to fill them with except the awareness of everything you owed. Monday, Darnell walked Theo to school and came home and cleaned the apartment. Not because it needed it, because he needed somewhere to put his hands. He wiped the counter twice. Reorganized the cabinet, which took 4 minutes because there wasn't enough in it to reorganize for longer than that. He stood in front of Theo's nightstand and looked at the inhaler for longer than he should have, almost empty. That was the phrase that kept coming back. Not empty, almost, which meant there was still time, but the time had a shape to it now, a visible edge. He called the pharmacy on Dunmore Street. A woman answered on the third ring. Friendly, in the automatic way of someone who answers buttons all day. He gave her Theo's name, gave the prescription number. Asked about the insurance card, which had been processing for 6 weeks, which the HR office at the warehouse had assured him twice was normal, which did not feel normal when you were looking at an almost empty inhaler. She put him on hold. He stood at the kitchen window and watched a pigeon work its way across the fire escape of the building, across the alley. Methodical. Checking each rung like it was inspected for something specific. The woman came back. The card still wasn't active. She didn't know how long. She was sorry. He thanked her and hung up and stood at the window a little longer. The pigeon found whatever it was looking for, or gave up looking, and flew off. Tuesday, he walked Theo to school and spent the morning going through the folder of documents he kept in the drawer under the dish towels. Bills. The lease. Theo's school forms. The letter from HR about the insurance card. He read the letter 3 times looking for something he'd missed and didn't find it. He walked to the old library and used their computer for an hour. Looked up Iron Wing's legacy. What he found surprised him. The organization had a website that looked like it had been built by someone who knew what they were doing, but had been told to keep it simple, clean. A photograph on the front page of a family standing outside a house that was clearly new. The father's hand down over him like he was making sure it was real. Below it, a number. 2,847 families helped since 2006, 11 states. He clicked through to the About page. Roy Brick Callahan. Founder. A paragraph, short, matter-of-fact. To the organization in 2006, following the death of his daughter, Nora, at age 8. The goal, to bridge the gap between crisis and recovery for families who fall through institutional cracks. Darnell read the paragraph twice. He looked at the photograph on the About page. Brick, younger, standing in front of a building with a small group of people, all of them wearing the vest. All of them holding tools of some kind, shovels or paintbrushes or what looked like framing lumber. He sat back. He thought about the parking lot, about the way Jean had looked at him when he'd crouched next to Brick, like it was an action from a category Jean has stopped expecting. Most people cross the street when they see us. He closed the browser tab, walked home. Made rice and canned tomatoes with the dried oregano that had been in the cabinet since before his wife died. Made it look like he'd planned it. Put it in a container for Theo's dinner. Wednesday, Theo came home and ate without complaint and did his homework at kitchen table, while Darnell sat across from him pretending to read. At bedtime, Theo asked if everything was okay. Darnell said yes. Theo looked at him the way he'd looked at the clouds, like he was deciding whether to accept an answer that didn't satisfy him. He accepted it. Darnell sat in the dark after Theo fell asleep and didn't write anything in his notebook. Thursday, he walked Theo to school, came home, sat at the table with the card in front of him and his coffee going cold beside it. He was meeting Brick in 3 days. He ran through what he chose to Loda say and what he didn't, and what he'd do if the whole thing turned out to be something other than what it looked like. He didn't come to any conclusions. He made fresh coffee and started again. Murphy's on 5th had been there since before Darnell moved to this part of the city. He'd walked past it dozens of times without going in. The sign above the door had faded to the point where the name was more suggested than stated. Inside, booths along one wall, a counter along the other, and the smell of coffee that had been brewing since early morning and would keep brewing until close. He arrived at 11:50. He took the booth by the window, ordered coffee, watched the door. Jean came first. He scanned the room, found Darnell, nodded once, and held the door open. Roy Callahan walked in behind him, different in daylight. Not smaller. The man was still the largest person in the room by a margin that mattered. But different in the way people were different after something had happened to their body that reminded it of its limits. He moved with a cane. Not dependency exactly, more like a negotiation. He wore the vest over a plain dark shirt. The Iron Rider's patches, the skull, the wings. He wore it the way some men wore a wedding ring, not as a statement but as a fact. He crossed to the booth. Darnell stood without thinking about it. Brick looked at him, really looked. The inventory kind of look, the one that took stock before it decided anything. Then he sat, slowly. Jean slid in beside him. The waitress came. Brick ordered black coffee and eggs. Jean shook his head. Darnell had his coffee. Brick put both hands flat on the table. 8 days ago, he said, I was on the ground of a parking lot thinking I was going to die there. Darnell waited. And you were the only person who stopped. The paramedics. Before the paramedics. Brick looked at him steady. You know what I mean. Darnell did. Brick leaned back slightly. His hands stayed on the table. He looked at them for a moment, then back up. Jean told me you used your last $8, he said. It's fine. It was your son's breakfast money. Darnell didn't answer that. Brick nodded. Like das Sansons confirmed something he'd already suspected. What do you need? He said. Nothing. Brick looked at him. Nothing, Darnell said again. Your boy's prescription is on Dunmore Street, Brick said. Insurance hasn't cleared. $62. Darnell went still. Jean did some asking around, Brick said. Not as an apology. As information. You had no right to do that. No, Brick said. I didn't. The table was quiet between them. The coffee came. The eggs came. Brick didn't touch either yet. I grew up in Harlan County, he said, eastern Kentucky. My father worked the mines from 17 until his lungs quit at 51. We had nothing. Not nothing the way people mean it now. Actually nothing. Winter nothing. The kind where you chose between the heating bill and food, and sometimes you got the choice wrong. He picked up his coffee, held it. I left at 19, came north, got into motorcycles because it was cheap transportation, and then it turned into something else. A community. People who'd been written off by every institution they'd ever tried to work with, and had decided the best answer to that was to handle things themselves. He drank the coffee, set it down. That's a longer story, he said, but it's the context. I was not judging the vest, Darnell said. Something moved in Brick's face, not quite a smile, the shape of one. I know you're not, he said. That's part of why we're sitting here. He looked at the table for a moment. I had a daughter, he said. He said it the way people said the things they'd said many times, but that never got easier because repetition didn't touch certain things. Her name was Nofra. She was 8. He paused. Leukemia. Diagnosed in March, 2 months before her 9th birthday. Gone in August. The diner moved around them. A woman laughed at a table, the back. A plate came down somewhere behind the counter. We had money, Brick said. Some. Not enough. The kind of not enough where everything came down to the timing. Approvals that took 6 weeks. Appeals that took longer. By the time anything moved, he stopped. His jaw tightened, then released. By the time anything moved, it had moved too far. Darnell looked at the man across the table. "I'm sorry," he said. Brick nodded. Once. Accepted it without deflecting it. 6 months after she died, I started Iron Wings Legacy, named it for her. She used to say she wanted to be a bird. Used to run around with her arms out like she was about to take off. He looked at his hands again. Then back up. We help families, medical bills, housing placements, prescription costs, job training, the things that fall into the space between what institutions cover and what people actually need. Jean slid a folder across the table. Darnell opened it. Annual reports going back 12 years. A letter from a state housing authority. Photographs. Families. People holding things, keys, documents, envelopes. One woman holding a prescription bag and laughing so hard at whoever was taking the pictures that her eyes were shut. Darnell looked at that one for a moment. Then he closed the folder. "What do you want from me?" he said. Brick reached into his vest pocket and took out a single sheet of paper. Folded once, he set it on the table and smoothed it flat with 2 fingers. Darnell looked at it. Iron Wings Legacy letterhead. His name at the top. Outreach Director. Full-time. $54,000 a year. Health insurance effective the first day. He read it through. Read it again. Then he folded it and pushed it back across the table. "I don't take work out of someone's pity," he said. Brick didn't move. "It's not pity," Jean said. Darnell looked at Jean. "I'm not talking to you." Jean went quiet. Brick watched this without expression. "What do you think pity looks like?" he said. "It looks like what you just did," Darnell said. "Someone's having a hard time. You hand them something. You feel square. They spend the next year wondering if they earned it. And what does this look like to you? A man trying to pay back a debt." "You're not wrong," Brick said. "But that's not the whole of it." He tapped the paper once. "I've been trying to fill that role for 8 months. 4 candidates. None of them right. Not on paper. On paper, they were all fine. Wrong in the room. You know how I know when someone is right for this particular work?" Darnell waited. "They spend their last $8, Brick said, at 11 at night, in a parking lot, when every person around them said don't. And they don't take more than 3 seconds to decide." The table held that for a moment. "I don't want your gratitude doing your hiring," Darnell said. "Then imagine we met differently," Brick said. "Imagine I called you in for an interview and I'm sitting across this table and I'm telling you that you are the most qualified person I have considered for this role. Not because of the parking lot. Because of who does something like that." Darnell looked at the folded paper between them. He didn't touch it. "I need time," he said. "Take it," Brick said. He picked up his fork and started on the eggs. They ate, or Brick ate, and Darnell drank his coffee, and Jean looked out the window. When the check came, Brick took it. Darnell didn't fight it. Outside on the sidewalk, Jean gave a nod and walked toward the motorcycles at the curb. Darnell and Brick stood in the afternoon light. 4 days, Brick said. "I was in that hospital for 4 days. People came by. People I've ridden with for 20 years. People from the organization. My doctor. My doctor's nurse." He looked at the street. "Not one of them did what you did." "I was just the one who was there," Darnell said. "That's exactly what I mean." Brick put out his hand. Darnell shook it. "However long you need," Brick said. He walked to his motorcycle. Got on it with the careful deliberateness of a man relearning his own body's terms. Then he rode off, and Jean followed, and just the sound of the engines faded around the corner. Darnell stood on the sidewalk with the folded paper in his jacket pocket and walked home. The motorcycles came on a Saturday. 7 days after the diner. 6 days after Darnell had put the job offer in the kitchen drawer under the dish towels and not looked at it again. He heard them before the first one turned onto his street. The sound built from somewhere far enough away that it was just a vibration at first. Something you felt in your chest before your ears sorted it out. Then louder. Then the street outside his window went chrome from one end to the other. He got to the window and counted until he stopped at 80 and gave up. There were more than 100. Iron riders, men and women both. Some of them gray-haired, some of them young enough to still something to prove. All wearing the vest, all of them parked in formation along both curbs, engines off, not a sound, just waiting. The building woke up in the wrong direction. He heard the first door open in the hallway, then voices, then more doors. He got Theo dressed before he went downstairs. He didn't let Theo run to the window. Outside, the street had become something else. Zoots on stoops, faces in windows. The young mother from the corner building with her daughter on her hip backed against the wall of the entrance like she was looking for a way through it. Mrs. Paulson from down the hall with her arms crossed so tight she was holding herself together, and Harold Stokes at the edge of the sidewalk, phone already up. He looked at Darnell when Darnell came out. What did you do? Not a question. A verdict. Harold, there are children on this block, Reeves. I know. I'm calling it in. Harold, please. I'm calling it in. He turned away, voice going flat and practiced. 30 years of it came back in an emergency like a leaf reflex. Darnell stood in the middle of the sidewalk. Jean stepped forward from the front of the group. Both hands up. Open, deliberate. We're not here to cause trouble. He said it to the street, not to any one person. We're here because one of your neighbors helped one of ours. We take care of our own. That includes the people who look out for them. A window opened on the second floor. You need to leave. Another voice from a stoop across the street. Get off our street. And then the boxes came out. A woman in a vest carried a bag of groceries toward the building entrance. A man behind her carried what looked like a medical kit. Two more behind him with boxes Darnell couldn't identify from where he stood. Jean turned toward the building. Is there a Dorothy Hale in this building? Apartment 12? Silence. A window on the ground floor opened. An older woman looked out, small, gray-haired, the thick glasses she wore that made her eyes look larger than they were. We have a 3-month supply of her heart medication, Jean said. No cost. Her name came through our outreach network. We'd like to deliver it. The street went a different kind of quiet. Harold had his phone up, but wasn't talking into it. A man's voice from somewhere to Darnell's left. Rough, skeptical, the voice of someone who had made a decision and was looking for confirmation. Who are you people exactly? Jean looked at him. Iron Wings Legacy. We're a nonprofit. 18 years. We've helped a lot of families in this state and the ones around it. We're not here to threaten anyone. We brought groceries, medical supplies, and a contribution to the Tenant Assistance Fund for this building. The man squinted. Never heard of you. Most people haven't, Jean said. We're not looking for recognition. A beat of silence. Then, a heavier man near the back of the gathered neighbors, someone Darnell recognized from the second floor, but had never spoken to, took a half step forward. Iron Wings Legacy, he said slowly. My brother-in-law, down in Tennessee, 3 years ago, he was about to lose his house. Medical debt from his wife's surgery. Someone from your organization came in and... He stopped, blinked. That was you? Jean looked at him directly. What's his name? Robert Tillett, Clarksville. Jean didn't pause. I remember that case. The man stared, and the street shifted. Not all at once. Not the way it happened in stories where everyone suddenly understood everything at the same moment. More like the way light changed when a cloud finally moved. Gradual then complete. One woman lowered her phone. Someone on a stoop sat down. The young mother from the corner building stopped pressing herself against the wall. Harold stood with his phone at his side. Not gone, not convinced, but quiet. Darnell watched the street change its mind about something it had already decided and thought about how rarely he got to see that happen. But not everyone, and not for long. The newspaper piece ran 2 days later, on a Monday. Vera called him before he saw it. Her voice had a quality he hadn't heard before, something careful in it, the voice of someone deciding how to hand something over without dropping it. "There's a piece in the Courier," she said. "Page 6. Read it before someone else shows it to you." He walked to the corner store and bought the paper, stood on the sidewalk and read it there. 6 paragraphs. The headline, "Local man's ties to iron riders raise questions." A byline he didn't recognize. Young name. The piece didn't say he had a criminal record. It didn't need to. It asked questions. Layered ones. Careful ones. What is the nature of Mr. Reeves's relationship with the Iron Riders? How long has he been affiliated with the organization? What does it mean for a neighborhood when those ties become visible? Nothing false. Every sentence technically a question, which made it worse. You couldn't correct a question. You couldn't point to the lie. The questions just sat there implying their answers, and the answers as they implied were not true, and there was nothing to push against because nothing had been stated. He folded the paper, walked home, sat at the table, called the warehouse. Powell answered on the second ring and said with genuine-sounding discomfort that, given the circumstances, it would be better if Darnell didn't come back in. He'd mailed the last paycheck. He was sorry about how things had gone. Darnell thanked him and hung up, called Vera. She answered immediately. He said, "A beat." Powell called, she said. 2 jobs, same week, both gone by noon on a Monday. He put the phone on the table. He didn't throw it, didn't slam anything. Just set it down and sat in the quiet apartment with Theo at school and Dool, the kitchen, doing its low, uneven hum, and Saint's newspaper folded on the table in front of him. He thought about the pharmacy on Dunmore Street. $62. He had $14 he'd found in the coat he hadn't worn since last winter, folded into the lining. $14 against 62. He opened the kitchen drawer, reached under the dish towels, took out the job offer. He put it on the table next to the newspaper. He looked at both of them. $54,000 a year. Health insurance day 1. The offer he'd called a debt repayment and pushed back across the table. He thought about what Brick had said. Not the pitch, the other thing. The thing about Nora and the 5 months and the approvals that came too late. He thought about Theo's inhaler, almost empty on the nightstand. He thought about his wife. Not with a story, with the fact of her, the way she was more real to him in certain moments than anything in the room. She'd had a way of cutting through the noise of a decision by asking the simplest possible question. Not what do you want, not what's right. She'd ask, what are you actually afraid of? He knew the answer. He was afraid the job was charity dressed up as employment. He was afraid of owing something he couldn't account for. He was afraid that if he took it, the thing he'd done in the parking lot would stop being a cheap choice he'd made and start being the first step in attraction. He sat with that for a while. Then he picked up the job offer and read it again from the top. $54,000. Health insurance day 1, outreach director. He folded it back up. He was not ready to say yes. But he was done saying no without examining what the no was actually protecting. He put both pieces of paper in the drawer. Separately, not touching. Then he went to pick up Theo from school. He didn't tell Theo about the jobs. Theo was 7. 7-year-olds needed dinner, not accounting. He made the rice and tomatoes again, the same as last week, and Theo ate it and narrated a disagreement he'd had with a classmate about whether a hot dog was a sandwich, a debate that had apparently consumed most of the afternoon. "It's a sandwich," Theo said. "It's meat and bread." "Most people say no," Darnell said. "Most people are wrong." Darnell looked at his son. "You get that from your mother." Theo considered this. "Is that good?" "Yeah," Darnell said. "It's good." After Theo was asleep, Darnell sat at the table. Not with the job offer, not with the newspaper. Just with the kitchen light and the hum and the particular quiet of an apartment where one person was awake and one was not. He pulled out his notebook. He didn't write the 3 things he usually wrote. He wrote a letter instead. Not for anyone outside the apartment. For Theo. The kind of letter you wrote when you needed to say something out loud but weren't ready for it to go anywhere yet. He wrote, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if what I did in that parking lot was wisdom or stubbornness or just the same thing dressed differently, depending on who's looking. Your mother would have known the difference. She always did. He wrote, "What I do know is this. That man was dying and I was the only one there. The only question I had time to actually answer was whether I was going to keep walking or stop. I stopped. And I would stop again," he wrote. "I'm not asking you to be fearless. Fear is useful. Fear keeps you alive, and fear keeps you honest. But there's something that looks like caution that's actually just the decision to let someone else's problem stay their problem. I don't want you to learn that from me, even if it costs us some things, even if it costs us a lot of things." He put the pen down, read it back. Then he turned the page and wrote at the top, "For Theo." He put the notebook in the drawer, not under the dish towels, on top of them. Then he went to bed. The knock came at 6:20 in the morning. Slow. Like someone who wasn't sure they had the right to be there but had come anyway. Darnell opened the door. Brick stood in the hallway. Alone, no Jean, no phone visibles, and just the man. In jeans and a plain dark jacket and the vest, because the vest was always there, and the cane, and one thing he was carrying. A photograph. Small. The kind that had lived somewhere close to a person for a long time. They looked at each other. "I heard about the jobs," Brick said. "Jean's network reaches far," Darnell said. "Vera called Jean. She wanted someone to know." Darnell looked at him for a moment, then stepped back from the door. Brick came in. He looked around the apartment without making a production of it. The way people looked at places when they were trying to understand someone by what the space said rather than what the person said. He moved to the kitchen table and sat down. Darnell made coffee, the good kind today. He'd been saving it. He wasn't sure what he'd been saving it for, but apparently this. He put 2 cups on the table and sat across from Brick. Brick set the photograph between them. A little girl, 8 years old, maybe less. 2 braids, gap between her front teeth. Standing somewhere outside, a chain-link fence behind her. Weeds coming up through concrete, with both arms spread wide. Not posed, caught mid-motion. Her mouth open like she was saying something or laughing at something, and whoever had the camera had just barely caught the moment before it went. Nora. She used to do that, Brick said, arms out, all the time. Grocery stores, parking lots, in the living room, for no reason. He spread his own arms slightly. A big man trying to remember what 8 felt like. Just open. Darnell looked at the photograph. "I'm not here to push you," Brick said. "I want to say that first. If you never call us again, the account between us is whatever you decide it is. You help me, and I'll carry that the rest of my life regardless of anything else." "Then why are you here?" Darnell said. Brick looked at the photograph. "Because Iron Wings is in trouble," he said, "and I need to tell someone the truth about it before I decide what to do next, and you're the only person I can think of who's earned the right to hear it." Darnell looked at him. "Not broke," Brick said, "not closing. But 2 years ago, I had the first episode. Heart. I was at home that time. Jean was there. They got to me in time. 3 days in the hospital." He paused. "While I was in there, things fell apart. Decisions that didn't get made. A family that needed a housing placement and didn't get called back in time. They were in a shelter for 3 more weeks because nobody followed up." "That's not your fault," Darnell said. "It's my organization," Brick said. "Everything moves inside, it moves. Because I built the structure, it moves through. If the structure fails, that's on me." He picked up his coffee, held it. "One, family. 3 more weeks in a shelter, because I hadn't put the right person in place to hold things when I couldn't." The kitchen was quiet. "I've been trying to find that person for 8 months, Brick said. 4 people came in and sat across from me and talked about the work, and none of them were wrong, exactly. None of them were right either. And then I'm on the ground in a parking lot, and some man I've never seen before is crouching next to me talking about clouds to keep me awake." Darnell looked at him. "You remembered that?" "I remember all of it," Brick said. "Every word." "You do, when you think it's the last thing you're going to hear." He set the coffee down. I thought, if I make it through this, that's the person. Not but because you know the work. Because of who you are when it costs you something to be it. Darnell was quiet. But I also need to tell you the rest, Brick said. The part Jean doesn't know I'm telling you. He looked at the photograph of Nora, then back at Darnell. We almost didn't survive the last 2 years. Financially. Not because of mismanagement. Not because I got sick and too damaged. Dogoner was samalo denounce of the late of someone they trusted, who had decided, without much evidence, that we weren't operating the way we said we were. We spent 14 months proving otherwise. 14 months of documentation and audits and explanations while families were waiting on us. He exhaled. We have 18 years of records, every dollar, every family. It's all there. But 14 months, Darnell. Darnell heard something in that. That's what this week has been, he said. Someone asked a question in print. Now I'm trying to exist inside the implication of it. I know, Brick said. That's partly why I came. Because I thought you might be at the point where you were wondering if it would have been easier to walk past me. No, Darnell said. Brick looked at him. I'm not wondering that, Darnell said. That part I'm clear on. The rest of it I'm less sure about. What are you less sure about? Darnell looked at the drawer under the dish towels. Whether taking the job means the choice I made becomes something different than what it was, he said. Whether I can work for you and know that I didn't take the job because you needed to give me something. Brick nodded slowly. He'd been expecting something in this direction. I can't answer that for you, he said. I can tell you what the job actually is. Not the title, the real work. And you can decide if it's something you want to do, separate from everything else. Then tell me, Darnell said, and Brick told him. He talked for 25 minutes. The applications that were clear and the ones that hid their real problem underneath the stated one. The families where the crisis was money, then the families where the money was just the surface of something longer. The decisions about limited resources when more than one family needed the same things at the same time. The people who called back and the ones who didn't, and what you did with the ones who didn't. He talked about a veteran in week 9 of Darnell's potential tenure who would probably hang up the phone 3 times before leaving a message. And what happened if no one called back within the hour. He talked about what it meant to be the person who showed up in the gap between the system and the family that the system had decided wasn't its problem. He didn't make it sound manageable. He didn't dress it up. He made it sound like the hardest and most specific and most necessary work a person could do. When he finished, the coffee was cold. Darnell got up, poured both cups into the sink, made fresh. He set the cups on the table and looked at the photograph of Nora still between them. I have 2 kitchens, he said. Brick looked at him. Theo's insurance starts the day I sign, not the 1st of next month. The day. Done, Brick said. Second, 30 days before I'm in the public face of anything. I need to learn the work before I represent anything outside the office. Done, Brick said. Darnell looked at him for a moment. I need a week, he said. I'm not saying no, but I need a week. Brick picked up the fresh coffee. Take 2, he said. 1's enough. Brick almost smiled. Not quite. The shape of it. He looked at Nora's photograph one more time, picked it up, slid it back into his breast pocket with the careful motion of returning something irreplaceable to its right place. He stood, got the cane, walked to the door. On the threshold, he stopped. The newspaper piece, he said. Don't respond yet. Give it a few days. People's attention moves fast, and sometimes the best answer is to let it move. And if it doesn't move, Darnell said. Then we respond together, Brick said, in writing, and we let 18 years of records speak. Darnell looked at him. You've done this before, he said. More times than I'd like, Brick said. Yeah, he went down the hall. Darnell closed the door, stood with his back against it. The apartment was quiet. The kitchen light was doing its hum. The drawer under the dish towels had the job offer in it and the notebook with the letter for Theo on top of it. He went and sat at the table. He thought about what his wife used to say, not the coffee mug version people remembered about her, The real version, the one she said at the kitchen table when something was genuinely hard and the answer wasn't obvious and he was going in circles. She'd say, "You already know. You're just waiting to trust it." He sat there a while longer. Then he heard Theo's door. Small feet on the floor, the familiar creak of the board outside the room. Theo appeared in the kitchen doorway. Red pajamas, hair going in all directions, eyes still mostly shut. "Dad, hey, what day is it?" "Tuesday." Theo processed this. "What's for breakfast?" Darnell got up. He'd found $14 in the coat he hadn't worn since last winter. $14 folded in the lining. Enough for eggs and bread, enough for a real breakfast. "Eggs," he said. Theo stopped. Looked at the stove, looked at Darnell. "Real eggs?" "Real eggs." Theo climbed into his chair at the table. He sat with his chin in his hand and watched his father crack the eggs into the pan, the way he watched things he didn't want to stop looking at. Like he understood, without having words for the understanding, that some ordinary mornings were worth paying attention to. The pan hissed. Outside, something that might have bird started up somewhere down the alley. Darnell stood at the stove and thought, 1 week. He already knew. He was just waiting to trust it. The week passed the way weeks did when something large was waiting at the end of them. Wednesday, he called the pharmacy, told them he'd begin Thursday. The woman asked how he was paying. He said he'd figure it out. She said okay in the tone of someone who'd heard that before. He called Jean after. Just asked if the offer to cover the prescriptions was still standing. She said yes before the sentence finished. Darnell said thank you, the kind of thank you that cost something to say. Not because he wasn't grateful, because accepting help from the right source still required you to put something down first. Thursday, he walked to Dunmore Street, stood outside the pharmacy a moment before going in, gave the name, waited at the counter. He held the bag with both hands on the sidewalk after, a full inhaler. $62 of air his son needed to breathe without fear. He stood there long enough that a woman had to step around him. He put it in his jacket and walked home faster than usual. He put the inhaler on Theo's nightstand while Theo was at school. Full, shook it once to confirm, set it down. Stood in the doorway of his son's room for a moment. Then went to the kitchen and sat at the table with the job offer in front of him. Friday, he walked to Murphy's on 5th, not because Brick had asked him back, because he needed to be in the room again, needed to ask the questions he'd been circling all week, not the large ones, the specific ones, the kind that told you whether you were really looking at what you thought you were looking at. Jean was already there when Darnell arrived at 9. He looked up from a folder, wanted to say something, saw Darnell's face and pointed to the back booth. Brick was already in it. Darnell sat down, no preamble. "I have questions," he said. "Go ahead," Brick said. He'd written 7 in his notebook the night before. Crossed out 3 during the night because they were fear-talking. Asked the 4 that remained. Straight, in order. What happen if Iron Wings shut down tomorrow? Who checked the work from outside? How did the organization decide when 2 families needed the same limited resource at the same time? And the 4th one, the one he'd written and crossed out twice and written again. What happened to the last person who held this role? And why weren't they still there? Brick answered the first 3 without hesitation. Real answers, not sales answers. The kind that acknowledged what didn't work as readily as what did. The 4th one he answered longest. A woman named Carla, 12 years ago, ran outreach for 18 months before she burned out so completely. She left non-profit work entirely and went to work for a hardware distributor and told Jean 2 years later that she still woke up some mornings feeling like she'd failed a test she hadn't known she was taking. Brick didn't blame her, said it plainly. The role hadn't been built right, too much weight on one person, no structure underneath her. He'd built what she needed after she was gone and spent years understanding that the thing he'd built too late for Carla was the reasons the 4 people who came after her had lasted. He said, "That's my failure, not hers." Said it the way someone said something they'd made peace with, but still carried. Darnell listened to all of it without writing anything down. When Brick finished, Darnell closed the notebook, put it in his pocket. "Okay," he said. Brick looked at him. "I'll take it." Something moved in Brick's face. Quiet, a door opening in a room where someone had been waiting. "The conditions still stand," Darnell said. "They stand," Brick said. Darnell put out his hand. Brick shook it. No ceremony. Two men at a diner table on a Friday morning with an agreement made in plain language over lukewarm coffee. But something settled in Darnell's chest that had not been settled in a long time. Not relief. Closer to the feeling of Saba's decision that was exactly the right size for the person making it. Jean appeared from the counter with paperwork before either of them said another word. Brick looked at him. "You had that ready," Brick said. "Since Wednesday," Jean said. Darnell signed. He told Theo that night. Not the full accounting, enough to be true. They were at the kitchen table after dinner. Theo had finished a fraction worksheet and was drawing a dog on the back of it. Confident proportions. Wrong anatomy. All 7-year-old commitment. Dad, Theo was out looking up. "Yeah, are you getting a different job? How'd you know?" "You keep reading that paper from the drawer." "I'm going to work for an organization," Darnell said. "They help families. People who need things they can't get on their own." Theo considered the dog, added a tail. "Like us?" he said. "Yeah, like us. A minute of drawing. Is it because of the man at the gas station?" Theo said. Darnell looked at him. "Who told you?" "Mrs. Paulson. She said you saved a man's life." "She shouldn't have told you that. Why not?" "Because it's mine to tell you." Theo looked at him with the unhurried seriousness he kept for things that mattered. "Okay," he said. "Tell me so," Darnell told him. "Not the version for other people. The real one. The parking lot. The $8. Harold's hand on his shoulders, the attendant going back inside. Brick on the ground with his face the wrong color. The way the man's eyes had found Darnell's and stayed there. The card, the diner, the job he'd pushed back across the table and Sisson signed for on a Friday morning. Theo listened with his elbows on the table and his chin in both hands. The drawing forgotten. When Darnell finished, Theo was quiet a moment. "Were you scared?" he said. "Yes. Of the man?" "Of doing something wrong," Darnell said. "Of making it worse by trying." Theo nodded. Like this made complete sense. "But you did it anyway." "Yeah." Theo looked at the table. At the long scratch along one side. "Mom would have done it too," he said. Darnell felt that move through him. Clean and direct. "She'd have beat me to it," he said. "Probably." Theo's mouth curved. The small smile that was more about remembering than being happy in the present. He picked up the pencil, added ears to the dog. "Dad? Yeah, can we get a dog?" Darnell looked at the drawing. "No." "Okay," Theo said. 10 days after the newspaper piece ran, Darnell wrote. He'd given it the time Brick suggested. Watched it stall, then a second piece appear. Shorter, pulling a quote from a neighborhood meeting he hadn't been at. Someone describing his presence among the motorcycles as concerning. He'd read it with his coffee going cold. Then, Thursday, walking Theo to school, he'd watched it happen. A woman from the pickup line, her son nearby. Theo moving toward the boy the natural way kids move toward kids they knew. And the woman redirecting her son. Quietly, no words. Just the practiced sideways pull of a parent who had already decided. Theo had watched the kid go, then looked down at his shoes. That was it. Not the articles, not the lost jobs. Not any of it. Theo looking down at his shoes. That night, Darnell sat at the table and wrote. Not an argument. Not a response to anything specific. Just what happened. The parking lot. The choice. The $8. And what they were for. Short sentences. True ones. At the end he wrote, I helped a man who needed help. I don't know what that makes me in someone else's story. I know what it makes me in mine. He posted it from his own account. No tags, no ask to share. He went to bed. Woke up to his phone already moving. By noon it had passed 90,000 shares. By the end of the weekend, 412,000 people he would never meet. The comments were not all kind, but the ones that stopped him. A woman who wrote, My husband died alone on a sidewalk 2 years ago. 3 people walked past him before someone stopped. I've thought about those 3 people every day since. Thank you for being the one who stopped. A man who wrote, I pulled away from someone in need last year. I've thought about more than most things that year. You said what I couldn't figure out how to say to myself. A mother who wrote only, I'm going to do better. 3 words. He didn't know what she meant by them or what doing better looked like in her specific life. But she'd written it where someone could see it. That was something. On the 4th day, the journalist called. Rennie Marsh. Young voice. Prepared for the call to go badly. Mr. Reeves, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to respond on record. You could have offered me that before you ran the piece, he said. Silence. I know, she said. Was that an apology? A pause, yes. My response is already public, he said. Quote from it directly. I'd prefer that to a paraphrase. Of course. A longer pause. Would you be willing to do a longer piece? About Iron Wings, about the work. Not yet. Ask me in 60 days. Why 60 days? Because in 60 days I'll have done enough to talk about it honestly. Silence. Okay, she said. Good, they hung up. He called Gene, told him about the call. Gene said smart. Darnell said I know. His first day at Iron Wings was a Monday. The office was a converted storefront, 3 blocks from the highway on Clement Street. Hand-lettered sign above the door. Inside, 4 desks, filing cabinets in 2 colors because they'd been bought at different times, and a white whiteboard along the back wall covered in names and numbers and arrows that made complete sense to whoever built it and would take Darnell 2 weeks to decode. Bet handled medical coordination. Efficient in the way of someone who had organized chaos long enough that individual chaos no longer registered as emergency. Ray managed housing files. Younger. The deliberate calm of someone who had seen enough difficult situations that difficulties itself had stopped being surprising. Gene handed him a folder on arrival. 14 pending outreach cases. Families who'd contacted Iron Wings in the last 3 weeks. Each one a page. He read the first, a woman 63 referred by her doctor. Heart medication she couldn't afford. Splitting her prescription in half to make it last. He looked up. Dorothy Hale, he said. Is she in here? Gene found the page. Held it up. Apartment 12, Darnell said. My building. I've lived 40 feet from her for 3 years. Gene let that sit without adding to it. That's the job, he said. Knowing what the people around you aren't saying. Because most of them won't say it until someone asks. Darnell looked at the folder. I'm going to see her today, he said. Go, Gene said. Dorothy Hale opened her door slowly and looked at Darnell with the mild surprise of someone who had stopped expecting much from the hallway. Oh, she said. You, me, he said. Can I come in? Her apartment was organized with the precision of someone who had lived alone a long time and decided exactly where everything went. A reading chair by the window, a shelf of photographs, the television volume turned down when she heard the knock. On the kitchen counter, a prescription bottle on its side, almost empty. She made tea, because she always made tea when someone came. Darnell sat at her table and waited. How long have you been cutting them in half? He said. She didn't ask how he knew. 4 months, she said. Why didn't you say anything? She looked at him with the directness of someone who had spent decades nexting the specific exhaustion of needing things and not wanting to need them. Because saying something means being a problem, she said. And I have never been willing to be someone's problem. Darnell felt that in a specific and personal place. You're not a problem, he said. You're a person who needs something. Those aren't the same. She looked at the prescription bottle. My son's all Sundays, she said. He's busy. He doesn't need to be worried. A 3-month supply, Darnell said. Full dose, starting this week, no cost. This is part of why I took this job. Exactly this. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. Her hand came across the table and covered his, small, the knuckles enlarged from years of work he couldn't name. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Reeves Center broke ground on a Saturday 58 days after Darnell signed. The lot was on Garfield Street, 2 blocks from his building. Vacant 11 years, chain link fence, weeds through cracked concrete. The Gap Street had been empty long enough that people had stopped seeing it as a space. The street closed at noon. By 12:30, it was full. Darnell stood at the edge of the lot with Theo beside him. Good shoes, put on without being asked. A sign made 2 nights ago at the kitchen table. Green marker on white poster board. Block letters, Reese Tenter. Below it, a drawing of a crown with wings that looked approximately like a crown with wings if you were 7, and giving it everything. The wings look good, Darnell said. Theo had known this. Vera was at the back of the crowd, in her coat and good shoes, arms folded, with the expression of someone who'd known something was coming and was satisfied to see it arrive. Bet and her husband. Ray in regular clothes, which made him look like a different person. Iron riders at the far end of the block, 40 of them, parked in 2 rows. Harold Stokes near the front, holding a shovel. Darnell saw it and said nothing. Some things you let be what they were. Brick arrived last. Jean's truck. Got out carefully, moved with the cane across the uneven ground, stopped at the chain-link fence. Looked at it for a long time. The weeds, the cracked concrete, the gap that was about to stop being a gap. Then he turned around. "I've been doing this force for 18 years, he said. His voice didn't need volume. It had weight instead. And the question I get most often is why motorcycles? Why that community? Why that image? The crowd was still. Because the people I started with knew what it was to be written off, Brick said. To have someone decide the story before it was told. And they decided the best response was to show up anyway, with what they had, for whoever needed it. He found Darnell in the crowd. 2 months ago, a man used his last $8 to keep me alive in a parking lot. When I asked what he needed, he said nothing. When I offered him this job, he said he didn't take work from someone's guilt. Brick paused. When I went to his apartment at 6 in the morning and told him the truth, he asked me 4 hard questions, took a week, and said yes. Complete stillness. His name is Darnell Reeves. This building carries his name because he is the reason it exists in this neighborhood. Not because he saved my life, because of who he was when he did it. Theo looked up at his father. Dad, he said quietly. Yeah, they're all looking at you. I know. Is that okay? Darnell thought about it. Yeah, he said, I think so. The speeches were short. 6 people said something. Vera said what only Vera could say, which was essentially, I knew this man when crackers was a lunch, and I'm glad things improved. The crowd laughed. Darnell put his face in his hand. They laughed more. Then the shovels went in, Brick. Then Jean. Then Darnell. Then Theo, who needed 2 hands and refused help and got there on the 3rd attempt. Then Harold Stokes picked up a shovel and put it into the ground, with the intention of someone who had been thinking about this for a while. He looked at Darnell after. Reeves, Harold said. Harold. Harold looked at the turned earth. I called the police the day they came, he said. When the bikes showed up. I want you to know I'm aware of that. I know you did. I'd call again, Harold said. If I believed there was a real threat. That's not something I'd change. I know that too. But I made an assumption about you that night at the gas station, Harold said. Because of how it looked, not because of what I actually knew. His jaw tightened, released. 30 years on the force. I should know the difference between those 2 things better than most. Darnell was quiet. I'm saying it out loud because it matters to say things out loud, Harold said. Even when nobody asked. Yeah, Darnell said. It does. Harold put out his hand. Darnell shook it. Harold moved back toward the other side of the lot. Darnell watched him go. Later, inside the unfinished building, a man appeared near the entrance. White man, maybe 65. A coat worn faithfully past its best years. Hands in pockets. Not circulating. Just standing, looking at the framed walls and the orange tape on the floor, with the look of someone who had come with a purpose and was finding it harder to execute than expected. Darnell walked over. Hey, he said. You Reeves, the man said. Yeah, the man looked at the space. My name's Gerald Foss, he said. I was at the gas station, Merritt Avenue. I was the one who grabbed your arm. Told you to walk away. Darnell went still. Now he had a name. Now Gerald Foss was a person and not just a coat and a hand and a voice in the dark. I remember, Darnell said. Gerald looked at the floor. I drove away, he said, pulled over 3 blocks down, watched the ambulance go past, then drove home. He stopped. My wife passed 2 years ago, a heart attack. I was upstairs. She was in the kitchen. By the time I got there, it was already too late to matter. The open house moved around them. I think about whether it would have mattered, Gerald said. If someone had been there before Ba got downstairs, if someone had done what you did, I think about it more than most other things. I'm sorry about your wife, Darnell said. Gerald nodded. Received it. The piece in the paper, he said. Recognized it was the same man. I wanted to see what it turned into. This, Darnell said. This is what it turned into. Gerald looked at the framed walls, the orange tape, the windows letting afternoon light in across the unfinished floor. My grandson, Gerald said. He's 19. Not sure what he's doing. I was wondering about the job training program. Come Monday, Darnell said. Bring him or bring his information. Either works. That's it? That's it. That's what the building is for. Gerald put out his hand. Darnell took it. I should have. Gerald started. Scared, Darnell said. That's human. What matters is you came back. Gerald held the handshake a moment longer than handshakes usually went. Then he let go. Put his hands in his coat pockets, walked to the door, paused at the entrance, and looked back once at the space before he stepped out into the afternoon. Theo appeared at Darnell's elbow. Who was that? A man named Gerald, Darnell said. He needed to see this. Theo looked at the door, then at his father. Dad, can I show you my room upstairs? It's not your room. I know, Theo said. My room upstairs. Darnell looked at his son. The sign still rolled under one arm. The sneakers starting to crease at the toe, the hair doing whatever it wanted. Yeah, he said. Show me. They went up. 3 months later. A Saturday morning, Theo sat across from Darnell at the kitchen table eating waffles, real ones from a box, which was not the same as from scratch, but was a different thing entirely from crackers and peanut butter. At some point, Theo looked up and studied the table with the expression he used for things he'd been sitting on for a while. Dad, he said. Yeah, why don't we get a new table? Darnell looked at the scratch along one side, the cardboard under the short leg, the blue mark near the edge Theo had left when he was 5. What's wrong with this one? He said. It wobbles, only a little. The scratch is big, character. Theo gave him the look. Dad, he said again. Darnell put his fork down. This table is where I counted money every night after the diner shift, he said. Figured out how far it needed to go. Where I read that job offer 6 times before I knew what I was deciding. Where I wrote you a letter in the middle of the night when I needed to say something out loud. He looked at his son. Where you ate crackers and peanut butter and didn't say a word about it. Theo looked at the table differently now. At the scratch. At the ring from 100 cups of coffee. At the mark he'd made when he was 5 that he probably didn't remember making. Oh, he said. Then a moment later, we could get a new table and keep this one too. Darnell looked at his son, 7 years old, gap-toothed, hair doing what it always did. The sneakers that needed replacing, which was fine. Which was something he could handle now. Yeah, Darnell said. We could do that. Theo nodded, like it had been obvious once someone looked. He picked up his fork and went back to the waffles. Outside the window, 2 blocks away, Reeves Center stood in the morning light. The south windows, the upper floor. The parking lot still clean, not yet marked by anything. A gap in the street that was becoming something. Darnell drank his coffee. Got up, rinsed the cup, stood at the window a moment. Then he went to do the dishes because Theo wasn't going to do them, and the day was still in front of them, and there was work on Monday, and a building 2 blocks away that needed everything it was going to need, one day at a time. He ran the water. Behind him, Theo started narrating something about whether syrup counted as a food group. Darnell answered where he needed to. Let the rest of the morning be what it was.